So I've decided that the orcs are going to have electricity. So we've built an electric pole that's kind of extending out over there. Obviously, it's a little weird because would you expect an orc to have electricity? Probably not. I've been playing a lot of Red Dead Redemption, the first one, and like these little electricity poles just add that Wild West vibe. So that's why we're going to be building some electricity poles. I do think we need to change this tough into deep slate just so it can match the dark oak a little better. But this is very, very expensive. The chains are surprisingly very expensive. I'd imagine with the recipe it should give you a few more chains, like maybe 4 chains or whatnot. But you get 1 chain for 1 bar and 2 nuggets. So it's kind of wacky. We're gonna do something a little interesting here, and we're gonna try to use a lead for this build. So the lead is gonna kind of connect to this electricity pole, and then that way we can kind of have it like this build is connected to the electricity. One of the really nice things you can do with boats now is that you can place them down and then you can actually use a lead on them. And so you can make some creative builds with leads that does not require using like a rabbit. You just lead the boat, and then I could just, bam. It's looking so wacky, but there you go. And then you just put these here so it doesn't move anymore, just in case. But let's take a look. Let's go to sleep first, and then we'll take a look. And bam, look at that. The general store is now connected to the grid. It looks kind of dumb, but it's such a small detail and a different use for leads. It actually looks pretty good, in my opinion. It's a very unconventional use for a lead, I must say. I've never really expected to be using leads in a build, but I think for this style, it definitely works pretty well. The only thing is it's kind of expensive since I don't really have many leads. So if we have the Wandering Trader come by, we'll have a nice little stock and nice little use for the Wandering Trader outside of his trades. But I actually did say that I don't want to build too much in this area right now, just because I want to give Mojang a little bit of time to kind of do their little update that they're planning, just so I can use the new vegetation blocks that are coming to this area. So in the meantime, I think we're going to head back to the Dwarven city of Ashgrund and do a little work on there. Editor Shohei popping in to say that I'm very well aware that the update has dropped a while ago, but that clip was filmed before the drop. So now back to the video. I always enjoy walking up to the city of Ashgrund. It's always feels so grand when you're coming through the city. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I actually haven't recorded in quite a few weeks. I think it's been almost 3 weeks since I last recorded. I've been kind of going through a bit of a burnout phase recently, and you know, kind of can't think of things to build. I'm kind of hit a creative rut, I guess you could say. It was kind of nice because I actually recorded that orc video quite a few weeks ago, and I kind of had it as a backlog and was able to kind of at least edit that and release that in the meantime while I wasn't making any Minecraft content here. But right now I'm feeling a little more motivated to build, so I wanted to come back here to the Dwarven city. And I think I want to build a building right here on the main street. This area right here is a little empty right now, so I think I want to add a building right smack dab in the front. One of the main buildings you would find in a Dwarven city would probably be a blacksmith. And I think for the main street of a city would be kind of the spot where you would find the main, you know, economy for the city. So, you know, we've got the iron foundry here, which is kind of smelting up a bunch of ores and making iron and stuff like that. And then I think for a Dwarven city, it would make sense for one of the main exports to be goods and tools and swords. So I think we'll have like a main blacksmith right here, or a blacksmith guild even, that's kind of forging a bunch of stuff to ship out right at the entrance of the city. And here is our blacksmith. We've got a little blacksmith sign right there, and for the meantime, we're calling it the Smoldering Pit. The name is subject to change, so if you got any ideas on what to call it, do let me know. But I imagine that this is a very popular blacksmith. That's why they're kind of located right in the front. Maybe it was the very first blacksmith in this area. They established a guild, and then they've got a lot of apprentices learning under them. It's probably from a very legendary blacksmith, I would say. So here's the build in the sky, and then here is the build with Fulbright on. This main building right here is a pretty basic build on the top side. We did kind of just use a bit of deep slate for the roof once again, and then we did try to add that little baked in lighting once again. It's not very noticeable since it's so dark back there, but it's something just very subtle. And then for the rest of the build, we decided to use some tuff, and then we did add a little bits of stone bricks in there just to add a little lighter color. And then the mossy stone bricks is also a very nice little blend for the tuff. One of the build philosophies for this build is that I wanted to keep the kind of the main sight line of the waterfall here. So when you come through the city, you can't really see the waterfall right away, but then as you turn the corner, the waterfall is right there. So one of the ways to keep the sight line was to make the main building taller on this side and then have it kind of slope down and kind of get this little curve right here so that we don't cover up this beautiful waterfall that we spent so much time making. In the future, I do want to add a lot more sight lines on this area right here on this cliffside, maybe a bunch of restaurants and whatnot. But this right here is the outdoor blacksmithing area. I imagine it's kind of one of those things where you got visitors and tourists kind of coming through, and then as you walk through the city, you come here to see the blacksmiths hard at work. The Dwarven blacksmiths, it's one of the main attractions for this area, I would imagine. It's kind of like when you're in Japan and you're watching the mochi masters kind of hammering the mochi with those big hammers. I'd imagine that's kind of the same thing. You've got a bunch of different dwarves here just smacking the anvils and making all these goods that you can bring with you to your family back home. So here we have a little forge area that's utilizing a little bit of lava. A lot of times in fantasy, like fantasy dwarves, they'll be using a lot of lava, and I haven't really been doing any of that because I don't necessarily think that this is deep enough for you, like the use of lava, but I think this is a nice little touch, and it's a nice way to add a little bit of light without having to spam these lanterns all the time. And we did add these little resin clumps as those little flicks of lava that pop out, and it kind of splashes down like you just saw something just popped up just now. Let's see if we can see a little splash of lava. There you go. Bam. And look, it popped right directly on this block. So a nice little touch to detail. And then we did add a little bit of copper, which kind of does look like the resin clumps, just like a little drier. It's kind of been sitting there for a little while and kind of cooled down a bit. So we've got this lava forge over here, but then we also have this dwarven furnace, I guess. I do enjoy adding these little chisel bits. I do feel like it adds a lot to the dwarven aesthetic. And then we've got iron shipments kind of sitting out and about throughout the build. I do imagine that the iron shipments probably coming from the forge or the foundry here, the iron foundry, which is our iron farm. Maybe I'll get rid of the iron and make it like this is where they send all of their ores and they smelt it all up. So copper would come out of here as well, I would imagine. And then they kind of just bring it over here. Kind of a nice little spot for them since they're neighbors. So I imagine they'd be doing a lot of business. And then of course, these two industries would make the most sense for a dwarven area. So you've got the metal ores and stuff, the metals and ores, and then you've got the actual tools and weapons and whatnot from the blacksmiths of the dwarves. The interior is barren at the moment, but I actually do want to do an interior for this video, kind of brighten this up so it's easier to see. But we've got quite a decent amount of space here. I imagine the top will be for kind of like living quarter space. Oh. One little detail I did add is I cut through this little dripstone right here, and we've got a little backdoor entrance now. And I'd want to kind of do this throughout the city where we've got little random spots that have maybe little gardens and whatnot. This obviously would not make too much sense. I don't think sugarcane growing in someone's backyard would make too much sense, but especially not in like cave setting. But I do want to add nice little bits of interest in these little small alleyways and nooks. And then there's a back door here as well. But anyways, that is the blacksmith exterior. Now I do want to do some interiors. So let's get working on some interiors, shall we? And the interior is now done. I do actually enjoy doing interiors, but man, doing interiors actually takes such a long time because like the blocks that you use for interiors, they're very like minute things. There's like small little blocks like this where you only use 1 or 2 of, and then it makes the inventory management just super annoying. But to start, we added a little bit of extra things on the outside. We added some little storage space, maybe some things where they're having shipped to the blacksmith. And then this spot right here is a little water spot for them to dunk the hot tools or hot metal into to cool it down. But when we go inside, we've got an interior. So since we're going for a Dwarven theme with little bits of technology splashed in with the diesel punk and the steampunk, I decided to add some machinery to the area. So this is supposed to be kind of like a power hammer where they don't have to manually hammer the tools themselves, and they just turn this thing on and it starts hammering the metal or whatever they're working on. Over here we have a little tinker's desk where they've got a sheet of metal right here, and then they are turning it into some little tool here. I think the pale oak button works pretty well for like a small iron like nugget type of thing. So it looks pretty good. And then little bamboo placemat here. Got a little extra storage space, and then this little spot right here for them to hang their tools, as well as over there. We've got a little interior furnace here where they can kind of heat up the items in here as well, and then work on it in here. Maybe the stuff in here would be smaller scale than the stuff that you'd find being worked out on here. So maybe they're working on like large chest plates out there, but then they're working on like daggers or whatever in the interior here. Over here, we've got a crafter, and then we've got this grindstone little mechanism here that's supposed to be kind of like an angle grinder, I guess you could say. Maybe a stone cutter would be a good angle grinder on its own, but I decided to do this instead. Then we've got some little paintings that just add a little bit of life. Maybe this is like a calendar, and then, yeah, that's just some artwork. Got a little storage space underneath the stairwell here, and then the most important part of any build, you need a sink, and then a bathroom. So this bathroom is actually a pretty simple, neat design though. It's got the mangrove as the toilet seat, and then there's water down there. So one of the things I want to do in this region is I want to build a sewer system. So eventually down the line, we'll have kind of the toilet connecting to the sewers once I kind of figure out what to do and where to put the sewers. And then going upstairs, we've got a living quarter, and we've got a bunch of bunk beds. We've got this triple bunk bed because 2 is not enough. But looks like we've got 9 different apprentices, and they've got these light gray beds. But then on the top bunk of this area, I've got 2 gray beds, and these are probably like the master blacksmiths maybe. That's why their bed is a little different color. But it is a pretty nice and cozy little area right here. We've got a little closet space for them to kind of put their goods. Got a little bit of light here with the candle and the lantern. And you've got actually a little view here to look at the iron foundry. And then eventually down the line, you'll be able to see something built over there. But speaking of views, are the views outside. The interiors for buildings take a really, really long time because, like I was saying, the inventory management is super tedious when it comes to like interiors. I really should start organizing a little more and maybe using a little more shulker boxes to help keep myself, you know, tidy. But the views from outside, the nice thing about like interiors is you can see them through the windows. Like you can see the little bit of the candle right there, and then you can see the actual like closet looking spot right there. And those little minor little things adds a ton of ambience to the whole environment. Obviously, when you're building, you know, nice exteriors for the builds, and you can't see the interior a lot of times, but these windows help you see a little bit and it adds a lot to the ambience. It is very subtle, but when you have windows and you can see into the interiors, it does add a lot to the world building, and it does add a lot to like making the world feel lived in. I do want to have a lot of moving parts too. I want to have a lot of villagers. The only thing is I need to keep them safe in here. Well, that's all the time for this video. Definitely a much shorter video than usual, but I'm working a bit on pacing and not rambling too much. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now.